Last night's strikes are the beginning of a credible and sustainable, persistent campaign to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
And once again, it must be clear to anyone who would plot against America and try to do Americans harm that we will not tolerate safe havens for terrorists who threaten our people.
That was U.S. Army Lieutenant General William Mayville and President Obama both discussing the first wave of U.S.-led airstrikes in Syria. Those mark a new military front in the Middle East and a new chapter in President Obama's legacy. The airstrikes in Syria are the beginning of what many expect to be a prolonged battle, and unlike the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, this one can't be traced to Obama's predecessor. For more on this, we're joined by the former U.S. Ambassador to Syria, Djerejian. Ambassador, thanks very much for being here.
Good to be with you, Sarah.
So when we look back on this, do you think that we will look at these airstrikes as sort of the beginning of President Obama's war?
Well, I think these airstrikes are necessary in order to stem ISIS's advances, not only in Syria, but certainly in Iraq. I think what the president has outlined is, they call it a strategy, but it's really a counterterrorism policy writ large, and a very necessary one, because ISIS constitutes a threat to every political regime in the region, be they Shiite or Sunni. ISIS poses a national security threat to Europe and the United States because of the foreign fighters that go in there and can come back to their homelands and conduct terrorist acts. So this is a major counterterrorism strategy. In the first instance, airstrikes with the hope, and I say it's a hope, of getting allies on the ground to follow up on the airstrikes to consolidate whatever military gains are made by the airstrikes.
And of course we know...
But to call it Obama's... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we know that President Obama is really cautious when it comes to using force like this. This is a guy who campaigned on ending the war in Iraq. So I'm curious what you think, was the final straw that pushed him to decide this is the strategy we need to go with.
Well, I think when he saw ISIS's rapid advances in Iraq, I mean, they're close to Baghdad. Not that they can take Baghdad, but they hold large swaths of territory in Syria and Iraq and are growing and constituting a major threat to their neighbors, which happen to be strong allies of the United States, be it Jordan, be it Egypt, be it Turkey, be it the Gulf countries. So this poses a national security threat to the United States, including possible homeland security threats. So I think this is what pushed him over, that he could not allow the United States to stand idly by while ISIS was making all these rapid advances.
Really quickly, I'm just wondering, because you are the ambassador and have such a good knowledge of what assets we have on the ground there, what do we have in terms of intelligence, in terms of support in Syria?
Not much. And this is one of the biggest problems of this, the air action in Syria, because unlike in Iraq, where we have the Iraqi military, we have the Kurdish Peshmerga and others on the ground, here in Syria, it's much more problematic, because the Free Syrian Army, the opposition to Bashar al-Assad's regime, is not very unified. It's disparate. The administration has gotten $500 million from Congress to train 5,000 soldiers, if you will, but that will take time. So the answer to your question is that we don't have many assets on the ground, and that is a liability.
All right, Ambassador, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.